You're in this by-election because you lost the Ottawa riding that you held for 2 decades. If you couldn't win your own riding, sir, why should people in Alberta and across the country give you a second chance?
Some people might say, well, it wasn't the best idea to run on a smaller federal public service when you're an Ottawa MP, but I had an entire country to represent, and I had to be honest with people.
Pierre Poilievre, welcome to the House.
Thank you for having me.
You have obviously seen these latest threats from Donald Trump. What, if anything, should Canada do differently in response?
Well, we've called on the Prime Minister and the government to allow the International Trade Committee to reconvene right now to have emergency hearings. This will be a chance for all parties to work together on a plan to get back to the table, get a deal done that will end the tariffs, allow Canadians unfettered access again to the American market, get rid of the softwood tariffs, the Buy America rules, the tariffs that have since come in under President Trump, and to as well provide the Americans assurance that we're going to rebuild our military in order to do our part in continental security. I think that is the best way forward in order to get a deal and bring some certainty to the Canadian economy and to our workers.
Your party has suggested that this move to have the committee meet is a way to show support to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, though, does already get a lot of advice when it comes to these negotiations. Obviously, he has his team, the ambassador, cabinet, the premiers of all political stripes, his Canada-US Council. What do you think this would add that he's not already getting?
All right. So before I get to what she just said, very good answer, I think. And it's a good answer not because of the fact that, he's saying, we need to fight back against Trump and everything like that. That's not the part of the good answer that I'm actually focusing on. What he's focusing on is the fact that Mark Carney has repeatedly said, like ad nauseum, that this has been a crisis. He said it all throughout his Liberal campaign, all throughout the Liberal leadership campaign. And recall that he said that this is the most significant crisis in our lifetimes, basically, is what he said. I may be paraphrasing a bit, but that's the implication that he gave. So what Pierre is saying is, why are we on summer break? Get back into the House.
And that's a good point. I mean, if you recall when we did the interview with Desiree Fixler, one of the things she said was Carney creates these crises and he's the only man that can solve them. And now the only man that can solve them is on vacation.
Right?
I get that the MPs need a break too, and many of them do tend to take a week or two of vacation, typically in July. Hello, Pazuzu. Anyways, they typically take it in July because things are kind of quieter.
Turn him away from the mic.
Sorry, you can probably all hear him purring. Hold on a second. Anyways, things are quieter in July, so they'll take a week or two, usually the back half of July, and they'll go on vacation with their family. But they are back in the constituencies doing work. But the point is, if Canada's in such a state, which it is, and you're a brand new government that hasn't even tabled a budget, why are you taking any time off at all? The Prime Minister can call everybody back to Parliament whenever he wants, so why didn't he just keep them in Parliament longer? The reason that they didn't table a budget was Carney was using the excuse, oh, well, we wanted everybody to have this tax break by Canada Day. Now, to my understanding, it's showing up on payroll, because I do payroll here for Northern Perspective, and we noticed that we got an extra $13 on the last paycheck, woohoo. But the point being that if you can do that, why can't you do a budget? Or why can't you do that first if you want that first, and then the budget second, and just stay for a little while longer in the summer? I guess the positive thing about delaying the budget, because they've said that they will put one forward in the fall, we'll see if it happens. But the positive thing is Pierre should be back in the House.
So the other thing that she said, and this is where I was laughing, is she said, Mr. Carney already has a lot of advisors around him. What does this need to go to committee for? Really?
It goes to committee so that the opposition parties have a chance to represent their constituents. That's how that works.
Well, and excuse me, CBC, if I'm being a little, I don't know, cynical, but since this is basically the same cabinet as Justin Trudeau had, there's not a lot of confidence in Canada that he has smart people around him advising him. We're not buying into that. Sorry.
Well, first of all, I think it's important that he be transparent and demonstrate he has a plan. Originally, he said that he would have a deal at the G7, and then it became a deal by the 21st of July, and now we see it's delayed again to August the 1st. And we want to know what the plan is to put an end to the tariff chaos. Secondly, I think it would allow us to redouble our pressure on the government to reverse the disastrous liberal economic policies that have made us so hopelessly reliant on the Americans. For example, to pressure the full repeal of C-69, the anti-pipeline and anti-energy law, the tanker ban, the energy cap, the industrial carbon tax, the plastics ban. All these things are really beating our economy to the ground and making us more dependent on the Americans. We need is a plan to bring home production and paychecks to this country, put Canada first, and that's one of the things that we think we could put on the table in immediate hearings on international trade at the committee.
You recently suggested that by cancelling the digital services tax, this was about 2 weeks ago, Mark Carney was putting his elbows down. Do you believe that Canada should have kept that tax in place?
I think the tax is a bad idea. I would have used it as a bargaining chip to get concessions in return.
Well, I should say, so we don't know, right?
For example,
because the negotiations aren't public, we don't know whether Canada got anything back, right?
We don't know, but it tends to be a mistake to give the concession before you get one in return. Now, I agree with getting rid of the tax. It was a disastrous tax that would have made life more expensive for Canadians. But we have to negotiate to get an end to the softwood tariffs that came in under Obama, Biden, and now Trump, and that are hammering our forestry sector. We need an end to the Buy America policies that are killing construction jobs in Canada, an exemption that Mr. Harper got when he was Prime Minister. So far, Prime Minister Carney has not received any concessions. He hasn't made any headway, and I don't blame him entirely for that. Obviously, he's dealing with unfair treatment by the Americans, but we want to see some wins for Canada, and we have suggestions on how to get those wins, because really we have to put our country first, and that's what we're asking for.
I mean...
Okay. What a difference in approach.
You know, I was just going to say that. You can hear him speaking. He's a lot gentler and more prime ministerial. Totally different Pierre than we saw going into the election.
We expected to see a completely different Pierre. We just didn't know what that would look like. And the way he's answering these questions, someone said it earlier, I think you've characterized this perfectly. Calm, cool, collected.
He's not as adversarial to the journalists, even though he typically doesn't like mainstream media journalists. I mean, they can sometimes ask some silly questions.
Right.
But, you know, this is how he was in our interview. Very calm, very gentle. He listens really well when you ask a question. Like, he takes a second and kind of processes it and then gives you an answer. He doesn't just, like, blurt something out. Yeah, this is nice to see.
Now, we're not commenting right now on whether we agree with the substance of the answers or anything like that yet. We're going to. But this is just on the method in which he's approaching this.
Sorry to butt in, but I think it's going to appeal to a lot more Canadians.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. So as it relates to the answer, the DST tax, the Conservatives were against this. And Pierre was, I think, some people were trying to call out the Conservatives a couple of weeks ago I think on the left, saying, you know, well, you're a hypocrite. You were against this, but you were, and then I think he was even asked, would you have kept the digital service tax in right now? And I believe Pierre had said, and this was in a French interview, yes, I would have, but not because it's a good thing, but because, as he just said, it's a bargaining chip that he could then say to Donald Trump, well, I want something back for this. Donald Trump, based on what we saw, he said, well, drop the DST and then we'll continue to talk. And Carney said, okay. And this is where it looks like that's what we got in return for it. So what Pierre is saying is he would have said to Trump, no. How about I drop the DST, we'll go back and talk, and you also give me this. How about that? Now, would that have worked? We won't know. But that's what he's saying his approach is going to be. At least we would get something. Again, we kind of talked about this when it actually happened. Why would you, in order to even sit down at the poker table, why would you give somebody, you know, an additional $500 when you were just kicked out of the room just to be able to sit down back at that table? You're already down $500. Now you have the rest of what you have to gamble with in your wallet, and that's it. And you have to find some way of trying to making up that $500, and people aren't really going to want to give it to you. So that's essentially the substance of his answer. So he had to dance a little bit on there, because it was kind of a tricky position to be in, where you supported something, then you said I wouldn't take it out, and then saying it's bad again. So it was a bit of a dance there, but I think he handled it well. And again, he's not speaking on this platform. He is not speaking to his base. That's something that people need to understand.
Right, because he's on CBC, so he's going to be speaking primarily to the older generation.
And the swing voters.
And primarily to people who are voting Liberal.
Right. So that's something to understand as well. You have to know your audience and who you're speaking to.
100%.
You say he hasn't made any headway, and I would again say that may or may not prove to be the case, because so much of this is happening away from the public eye. But I want to go back to what Donald Trump has just said.
If I could, on that point, I'd just say, and I hope he does, I hope that you're right. I hope that there are some big wins for Canada. And I told Prime Minister Carney in our several conversations that Conservatives stand ready to help in any way we can, to reach out to lawmakers on the American side of the border, to offer suggestions and present a united Canadian front, because we really do hope that we get a good deal for all Canadians.
You're going to hear a lot about this, I think, moving forward. You can't just trash everything that Mark Carney is doing. You can't trash everything that the Liberals are doing. Even if it's good, that's the problem.
Well, you can build upon it. Well, you know, they did X, but they could have also done Y.
Right. Or they, you know what, they should have done this. You can be with them on the end goal, which is we need to get out from under these tariffs, which that seems to be what he's trying to do. But then you can oppose them within that sphere. And that's going to be the very tricky part of this opposition. Trudeau's policies were very unpopular, and it was easy to just outright oppose them. But when you're talking about something like this, tariffs are bad for Canada. Doesn't matter who you're talking to. So to get out from underneath that, you have to be kind of on the same page and say, yes, we agree. We hope we can get out of this. If you keep saying, like, how do you oppose that? You can't say, no, tariffs are good for Canada. That's not going to work. Canadians are going to hate you for that. So you have to say, yes, tariffs are bad, and we hope we get a good deal for Canada. But how are you doing that? So that's where they're going to, look at opposing and picking it apart.
Has he taken you up on that, or have you done that proactively?
So far, I have talked to numerous lawmakers and advocated for the Canadian position, but we haven't formally engaged in traveling to the U.S. at this point. But I told the Prime Minister that we as Canadian Conservatives, we put our country first, and we're prepared to work with anybody from any party to get a good deal for Canada.
Want to drop a few names for us, Mr. Poilievre? Who have you been speaking to?
Well, I spoke to Pete Sessions. He's a congressman from Texas. I spoke to number of other congressmen who were in town for the Calgary Stampede in passing. And we stand ready to do more if the Prime Minister wants us to help engage in the diplomatic process. We're happy to do it. One great way to do that is let's pull back the International Trade Committee and work together on getting the message out.
So I want to continue with this latest message from President Trump. He has said that Canada will face greater tariffs if we try to retaliate against a higher level of tariffs that he is proposing. Should those threats stop Canada from retaliation? Do we need to heed that warning?
I think we should try to get the deal done on the deadline, and that way we don't have to worry about tariffs that hurt both of our countries. I'm at a company right now in Stettler, Alberta, that has been said that they're paying the import tariffs that Canada is charging on some of the materials they put into their products. And we want to make sure that whatever tariffs that we counter with against the Americans do maximum impact on the American side of the border, minimal impact on the Canadian side. We should only be targeting things that we can make ourselves, that we can get from other countries, or that we don't ultimately need, so that we minimize the economic pain that Canadians pay for an act that, frankly, is not the fault of our people or our country.
You mentioned the deadline, and you talked about the fact that it has changed a few times. But fundamentally, Mark Carney said the purpose of this deadline is deadlines focus the mind. Was the deadline a good idea?
Interesting. So the main question was, do you think that Canada should retaliate to these new tariffs that Donald Trump has threatened? If you do retaliate, then we're going to hit you even more. So it's an interesting question. Well, I choose not option A or B. I'm creating option C, which is get the deal done. And then you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be in that position to actually make that decision. So I think that's good. I think that was a very good response, because otherwise you're in that, well, do you or don't you? And then it's, are you standing up for Canada by saying, yes, we need more tariffs? That's almost a catch-22, because by implementing more tariffs, then you risk higher tariffs against Canada.
But you also affect Canadian citizens, because
Correct.
when a government, like when the Canadian government puts tariffs on things, it's us as citizens who pays those tariffs. You're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, aren't you?
Well, and this is where I think Mark Carney's first move as Prime Minister should not have been to fly to Europe, but to fly down to the US and start getting this sorted out. I don't think it was a good idea for him to spend $500,000 of Canadian taxpayer money and go over to Europe and, ask the King to come and, open Parliament for him, as well as, schmooze with some of the other European leaders. Don't think that was the most pressing thing on the agenda. And it's obvious his team right now isn't really doing a lot to make a lot of progress, because, as Pierre said, this isn't in dispute. This was supposed to be over by the G7. Then it was supposed to be over by the 21st of July. Now we hear this will be over by August 1st. So they're not doing an effective job. Now, Donald Trump's people could also be playing hardball, 100%. But where there's a will, there's a way. How does UK already have a deal?
Well, the challenge with a unilateral self-imposed deadline is it tells the counterparty that they have you on a clock, and a clock that only applies to you. It's like if we're playing chess and on your side it's speed chess, and you have a clock on you have to watch while you're making your move, and I don't. Then I have a lot more ability to sit back and watch the board while you're watching the clock. And so I personally think it would have been better not to show that up front to the Americans, because we know that President Trump will try to take advantage of it. That said, we do think that we do need to work to get this done as quickly as possible, because every passing day brings uncertainty and paralysis.
I just want to ask you one more thing about this trade situation. We can all see, and this is not necessarily new, but the president is quite hung up on Canada's supply management system. If that is ultimately where the deal hinges, if that's what's standing in the way of a deal, do you believe that Canada should be willing to give a little bit to allow Americans to sell more of their products here?
Okay, so addressing the previous question, good answer by Pierre, in that I wouldn't have even put in a deadline, and he makes a really good point. When you put in a deadline yourself, and you broadcast to everybody, this is my deadline, then you give your opponent an advantage. The criticism to not having a deadline is some people could say, your opponents would be able to say, look, there's no urgency. There's no urgency to get this done. They're not setting a date when they need to actually get this done. So there's pros and cons, but if I'm the person on the other side and I'm serious about getting this deal done, I'm not worried about what my opponents in Canada are saying. I'm worrying about what my opponent that I'm negotiating with is saying at that particular time. Because if your ultimate goal is to complete that negotiation, why would you put yourself in a more compromised position when it doesn't benefit you at all? This is where it comes from playing politics to actually doing what's best for the country. And I think that's what he's talking about. Now, when he's talking about supply management, I want to make sure everyone kind of understands what this is, because this is one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot, and it's very vague. Some people know what it is, some people do not. We didn't when we first started covering politics, so
I still kind of don't.
If you don't, don't worry. So supply management is essentially a fancy word for saying quotas. So if you're an American company, and this is what Donald Trump talks about, they put, terrible tariffs on our farmers and all this stuff. So American farmers can sell stuff up here without any tariffs at all, up to a certain point. So if they cross, 100,000 units of X, then tariffs kick in.
Right, but it's not, I remember you saying this, it doesn't go like from 0 to 400 as soon as you cross that line. It's incremental.
Right. So what that is designed to do is to keep the playing field fair for the Canadian businesses, because our Canadian businesses, just because of population and scale, many of them are not as large as the Americans. So if we didn't have supply management, you could argue that our market would just be flooded with all of the American goods, more mass produced, lower cost. They could kill the Canadian economy in those sectors and kill all those jobs. That's what supply management is intended to do. Now, you can argue whether or not the quotas are at the right level. You could argue whether or not the tariffs are at the right level. That's up for debate. And we're not here to argue whether or not supply management is good or bad, but this is what they're talking about when they're talking about supply management.
Well, what I would say to to our American friends is, are you willing to get rid of the tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of farm subsidies that the American taxpayer gives producers on their side of the border, and that ultimately present a disadvantage to our farmers? Mm-hmm. Our farmers have to compete with massive multi-billion-dollar subsidies on the American side that we don't get here. And so I do find it passing strange that the U.S. government would say that our farmers are somehow getting an unfair advantage. But I also don't think that we should be making, I don't think we should be making, these kinds of proactive, unilateral concessions, because that's not how you do a negotiation.
But is there any wiggle room, is what I want to understand from your point of view, because it's a very politically charged issue in Canada.
But there already has been wiggling. The last USMCA allowed for more market access by the Americans. I'm not even sure if the American producers are using the market access that Prime Minister Trudeau sacrificed. There's also been new penalties on Canadian exports of dairy in the prior USMCA. So I think that Canada has made, the Liberal government has made big concessions on this already. And the problem is they're not getting anything in return.
Well, I suppose the question of how big they are, your point to that in your answer, right? If the Americans aren't using them, perhaps the concessions ultimately weren't all that big. I guess we'll see where this conversation goes. I do want to ask you, though, before we let you go, we're reaching you in Alberta. You're there campaigning for the by-election in Battle River, Crowfoot.
It's a great place to be, back on the prairies.
Indeed. Well, listen, it does appear that we are heading towards a referendum on Alberta separation. When you are speaking to folks on the ground in the riding that you hope to win, are you telling them that they should remain part of Canada regardless of who is governing? I know you want to make the case for a Conservative government, but that referendum is likely to come sooner rather than later. Would you say to them they should stay even with Mark Carney in power?
They should stay in Canada.
Yes. Are you
that,
actively advocating for it?
If you're asking me, absolutely. I'm advocating for a united Canada, and I say that on the doorstep. I say it when I'm in town halls. I say it every time it comes up. I said it at the Calgary Stampede. So I'm not being wishy-washy about this. I'm a Canadian. I'm a Canadian patriot. I'm proud that I grew up in southern Alberta, in Calgary, and I'm a very proud born and bred Albertan. Canada is my country. Canada is the country that the people in Battle River, Crowfoot call home. If you look around this community, the communities here, you will see the Canadian flag everywhere. It's on front lawns, it's on doorsteps, it's on people have Canadian flags on their pickup trucks. This is a very patriotic place, and I have, with no hesitation whatsoever, saying that Alberta should be part of Canada. And I should also say, though, the days of telling Alberta to pay up and shut up, to just send more and more money to Ottawa, while the Liberal government there blocks pipelines, destroys the energy sector, disrespects farmers, harms the economy, those days are over. We need to respect what Alberta is contributing. We need pipelines built. We need to repeal C-69, the anti-pipeline law, get rid of the tanker ban, the energy cap, the industrial carbon tax. We need to respect licensed firearms owners and farmers. Those are all things that can happen within a united Canada, and I pledge to be both a champion for fairness for Alberta and a united Canada for our entire country.
Very
well spoken.
Very, very strategic, Mr. Poilievre. That was a trap question, and she was trying to wedge him against the people that he's actually going to be asking to vote, potentially. We don't know the percentage of people in Battle River, Crowfoot that feel one way or the other, but at least he came out and stated his position. He wasn't wishy-washy about it.
And you know what? This is what you get with Pierre. You ask him something, and he gives you an honest answer.
Yeah. It's rare. Sometimes he does it, but it's rare that he will try and skate around and doesn't really give you an answer.
But it's not like, the Liberals, for example, who were going around the Ottawa ridings telling everybody, the Conservatives are going to take your jobs, and now they're talking about cutting up to 90,000 jobs. Construction
Crony says, especially is such a dumb question. Yeah, I agree. It was a stupid question. And at least people know where Pierre stands on this. He believes in a united country, and he also believes that Alberta has gotten a raw deal. Well, I think most of us believe that Alberta has gotten a raw deal.
That's our position.
100%. 100% Alberta has gotten a raw deal.
And as Conservatives, we want to be here to help in the fight. Right. Even though we're based out of Ontario, we think Alberta is getting a raw deal. And we don't want to see Alberta leave. We want to see them stop being bullied by Ottawa.
I love Alberta. I was there for not even a couple days. You guys are freaking awesome. Just saying. Oh my goodness.
What?
I forgot.
What are you doing? I don't know where he's going. Oh, he's getting the hat. He is getting the hat, folks. There we go. It's gonna be Ryan's live stream hat, I think.
This is my live stream hat. Covers my bald head, and it's mainly for the consideration of the viewers, so you don't get the shine off my head. So there you go. But again, shout out to Tara and J.R. Cox for taking care of me.
Is that putting up with you?
Putting up with me is probably a better phrase for it. But like I just gotta say it again. Every Albertan I met was just an amazing person out there. Seriously.
That's what I love about this country. We have such amazing people, like just all the way from BC to PEI and everywhere in between. And each little place has its own customs and culture. It's really fantastic, and I would be very sad to see parts of Canada leave, essentially.
Well, and we've committed, all of us are going to the Stampede next year.
Yes, my parents are going to come with us.
And we are going to arrange some sort of NP Nation meetup while we're there. So, 360 days and counting, something like that.
But that reminds me, we're actually going to be in Calgary in January. We've confirmed. Well,
we've
almost confirmed it now.
Yeah, we've
confirmed
95.
it to the point where I can say that we're going to be there.
We'll be back in Calgary in January. It'll be a little bit colder, but that's okay. Maybe you can convince Tanya that the winters aren't so bad.
I don't know. I heard that the winds that come through are really bad if you get constant migraines. So
there you go. Anyway, enough about this stuff. Let's keep going.
And indeed, many of those issues did come up in the last election, and you're in this by-election because you lost the Ottawa riding that you held for 2 decades. If you couldn't win your own riding, sir, why should people in Alberta and across the country give you a second chance?
Well, listen, the reality is we got 8.3 million votes across the country, 2.5 million more than we had in the prior election. We added 25 seats. We got the largest share of vote of a Conservative Party has had since 1988. So the answer is that the voice that I bring represents those 8 million plus people who believed in my message of fighting inflation, of getting affordable homes built, of locking up criminals, defeating drugs, unleashing our resources. Those are the messages, and those things mattered to those people. And I think that if you look at how the debate has changed in Canada as a result of the arguments and the causes that I've taken on, that voice has been very important to countless people, and it's a voice I want to amplify.
Then how do you make sense of the 4,513 votes that you lost by in your riding?
Well, the reality is it's a riding that is over. It was very simple. I was very clear that we would be cutting the federal bureaucracy if I was Prime Minister. And it was an Ottawa riding with a lot of federal public servants who disagreed with that approach. And they ran a very aggressive campaign, particularly the public sector unions did, to defeat me on that basis. Now, some people might say, well, it wasn't the best idea to run on a smaller federal public service when you're an Ottawa MP, but I had an entire country to represent, and I had to be honest with people. Like, I guess I could have done what the Liberals did, which is hide their plans. But I didn't do that. I said very clearly, we're going to have to eliminate federal public service jobs. That's the only way you bring down taxes and deficits. And I was honest about that, and the people in that particular constituency voted accordingly.
Great answer.
It's true, though.
It's funny how you get a great answer when you're just honest.
Well, and there's been a lot of flack online about that, but I don't see anything wrong with his answer because it's genuine. It's the truth.
Well, and
it wasn't the riding change because as late as even January, it was still polling blue, so it wasn't that. It wasn't the longest ballot, as we've said, even though we have we had a petition against the longest ballot, which just closed yesterday. I don't think it favors any one particular candidate on the ballot, and it doesn't disfavor anybody either. So I don't think you can point it at that. I think a large chunk of it was the public service. And then the other thing is that because Pierre's the leader of the party, he's going across the country and doing rallies, doing events, doing all sorts of things. And he wasn't in the riding doing the door knocking himself. It's volunteers that do it. Well,
and as we talked about on a recent video, the Conservative plan was to cut the public service by attrition. As people retired, they wouldn't rehire those positions. Now you have Mark Carney having to pay for a $92 billion deficit, which is 50% more than the $62 billion deficit that everyone gasped on.
Right, which was 50% more than what the Liberals wanted. They wanted to cut off at $40 billion. So just the numbers are insane.
Right.
Absolutely insane.
So now Mark Carney has to look at laying off 21% of that workforce. So he has asked for a 7.5% cut across the government. And I still have a few ears in some of the agencies in there, so I'm waiting to hear what they actually get. But everyone's bracing for it. Everyone that I've talked to, they're not bracing for project cuts. They're bracing for payroll cuts.
Well, because payroll in corporate or government or any company, it's the bulk of your spending. It's payroll.
Right. So you end up with this problem that the Carney Liberals have completely created for themselves. And Pierre's answer to this question is, listen, I could have lied. I could have lied to all of my constituents, just like Justin Trudeau did by hiding the carbon tax. He didn't run on a carbon tax.
No, he didn't at all. Wait, sorry, just to cut you off. If you have not already, please make sure that you pick up a copy of Franco Terrazzano's book, Axing the Carbon Tax, pardon me. It's excellent. Absolutely excellent. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, and he talks about this. So so he could have lied, and maybe he would have won, but what have you then demonstrated to your constituents? That you're not willing to do that. And as he said, as the leader of the party, he has to represent all Canadians. So he ran on the platform he did, and he's basically saying, so be it. That's the choice they made.
Right.
But he's also saying, whether you agree with it or not, that we've had massive gains across the country, highest voting share since 1988, highest number of voters ever because of the population increases, and he's hopeful now.
Well, and just to jump in, I think this is why Pierre's not gone, right? Like, they didn't get rid of him right after the election, is because they did have the best results that they have had since, I think we said 2003, was it? It's been a very, very long time. And Pierre was the leader that got them there.
And Chris Sokonowicz saying, I read there was an internal memo sent out to the government agencies. Yeah, check out our video a couple days ago. We actually talk about this, and we read one of the memos sent out to one of the government agencies. So they absolutely did. You are correct on that. So anyway.
Okay, Mr. Poilievre, you have been generous with your time in the middle of this by-election. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back on the program. Thank you very much.
Never mind, it's over.
And that's that, folks.
But she's not pleasant to, like, she doesn't have a pleasant demeanor when she's talking. Now, I guess, maybe the response to that is you don't need to have a pleasant demeanor.
Well, I think most mainstream journalists are a little bit more neutral. Like, when we're doing interviews, we're jovial, we're friendly,
Yeah.
Unless it's really such serious subject matter, but
when she says, but why should Canadians? Why should they? Okay, well.
But that's a good question, because then it gives Pierre the opportunity to tell Canadians exactly.
Don't get me wrong. Like the way he handled it, someone made a comparison to kind of like Jordan Peterson. Sometimes when you get those questions asked in kind of a biased way, it makes for a better answer, and that actually is a favor to you as the person being interviewed. So
well, and you know what? One of the first interviews that we ever did was our friend David Sweet, who's the former MP for Flamborough-Glanbrook. And we had asked him beforehand, like, David, is there anything that you don't want us to ask you about? And he's like,
I don't care.
Yeah. He's like, you know what? If you get asked a difficult question, it gives you the opportunity to bring people around to your position. It's like, that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. Our first interview was actually while we were in New Brunswick. So
yeah, while we were puppets.
It was terrible because, yeah.
And you know what? Shout out to David, too, because he owns a campground in New Brunswick, just outside of Tabasintac, and it's called the Ocean River RV Resort, and it is gorgeous. So if you're looking for a nice place to go this summer, check it out.
So anyway, very interesting new approach from Pierre in terms of how he's communicating. Zero slogans. Zero. He snuck in, bring home this and putting Canada first, but it didn't feel like a slogan. It just felt like something he was saying.
Well, and I was having a discussion with somebody in the party about this recently, about the slogans. I didn't mind the slogans. I know a lot of people had issues with the slogans, but for me, it was kind of like the slogan is the umbrella, and then you have all of your actual talking points underneath that umbrella. So like stop the crime, for example. Okay, we're going to stop the fentanyl trafficking. We're going to stop letting people make it in Canada. We're going to get people into treatment. We're going to keep criminals in jail where they belong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I like the slogans, but that's just me.
Well, the problem is when you hear them over and over and over and over and over again, when you continue to hear them, you almost start tuning out because you're like, okay, I don't need to hear this again. I know this is stop the crime. I know this is axe the tax. I know this is fix the budget. I know. So, but I think when you hear it over and over and over again, people get fatigued from it, and I get it. And we heard a lot of that feedback towards the end of the campaign.
Yeah, Ragman X6256 says they became a fatiguing feature quickly.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So I think you want to get them ringing in people's heads. I get it. So obviously the approach now is, well, either they're going to work on new slogans and then bring them in, or use them sparingly. So we'll see what happens. But very interesting new Pierre that we saw in that interview. And I think Tanya is right. I think this type of communication style is going to be much more appealing to those swing voters that didn't like him.
But I wonder if you're going to get people who are saying, well, he's not aggressive enough, or he's not fighting hard enough, et cetera, et cetera. You're already starting to see some of that online. So
let's wait. I think we need to hold the jury on that until he's back in Parliament, right?
But, the thing is, like we've had the opportunity to speak to Pierre on numerous occasions, and he's just such a great guy. Like, he's really chill. And I feel like when he is attacking the government in Parliament, that he has to be aggressive. And so that's what people think he's like, but he's not. So I think this new interview style will help people see the real Pierre.
And I think, I wonder if they're going to be approaching it this way, where when he's on these news channels and he's on mainstream media, legacy media, are you going to see this Pierre, and when he's in the House, are you going to see more of that high energy Pierre, because he's in the House and because his job in there is to hold the government to account? So he may look at playing both sides there, where he's presenting the polished prime minister in waiting on the legacy media, but when he's in the House, he goes after Carney and debates the crap out of him.
I want to read this comment from Veronica Taylor 780. It says, I like the new Pierre, but don't forget the old Pierre is still inside. And you know what? That's a good point. I think if there's something that he needs to get passionate about, he absolutely will.
I think so. We kind of saw that in the interview that I did with him in Calgary, where a little bit of that came out, which was nice to see. But
he was interviewing you a lot too.
Yeah, he was interviewing me a lot.
It was nice to see.
It was a pleasure to be interviewed by Pierre on Northern Perspective.